Hey there, Mr. K here. Okay, so here's my poet. His name is Dylan Thomas. That's one of his better pictures, actually, right there. And you can find out more about him at dylanthomas.com. I chose him because I think he has a wonderfully tragic story, as all good poets ought. I like the time period from which he comes. It's a very elegant time in our language. There's no texting, and there's no short-changing our beautiful English. He was born on the 27th of October, 1914, which means next year he would have been 100. Look out for that. From a place called Swansea in the country of Wales. I may be mispronouncing Swansea because Welsh is a ridiculous language. And then he dies on November 9th, 1953 in the city that never sleeps. A couple of some milestones, and I've got about a dozen milestones we're going to share today. He quits school to be a reporter, and he gets work with the South Wales Times. He also joins the Swansea Little Theatre as opposed to the Swansea Grand Theatre. He joins the Swansea Little Theatre, and because he still works for the Times, he gets published. So his first published, "And Death Shall Have No Dominion," That Sanity Be Kept, his first two titles, and we always put poems in quotation marks. Book titles get underlined, poems get quoted as part of a larger collection. Okay, let's take a walk over to the other side of the room here and do a little more. In the 1930s, a formative decade for him, meets a woman named Caitlin at a pub in London, spends the weekend in the public house hotel rooms, and charges the whole thing to her boyfriend. That will catch up with him at the end of that year. Her boyfriend beats him up well. And I guess he showed him because Dylan married her anyway. In 1937, and then 2 years later, their son, Llewellyn Edward Thomas, was born, their only son. And his first book, The World I Breathe, well, first book published in America anyway, so now he's becoming famous across the pond, as they might say. Starting to gain some international notoriety. He then publishes a semi-autobiographical tome called A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Dog. That's a very ironic title because he would have known James Joyce as the world did, and he would have been influenced by him. And James Joyce's semi-autobiographical book was called A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. So this was kind of a tongue-in-cheek, ironical title. They have a daughter, Aranwy Bryan Thomas. I'm probably killing that pronunciation again because it's in Welsh. He begins his radio broadcast career in the early 40s. Now, our man Dylan Thomas was a bit of a drinker, and not because he was thirsty. He was losing control over it. And here's one of the first episodes of his unmanageability of his drinking. He misses the wedding of Vernon Watkins, long time friend and fellow artist and writer. He was supposed to be his best man, just didn't show. He begins a long and prolific BBC radio contribution, and it is said that he probably contributed in one way or another, whether he starred in them or wrote them, about 100 or more BBC broadcasts, and begins work on 3 screenplays in 1948, but the film company goes under. So he was already trying to get his hand. The man worked a lot, wrote a lot, published a lot, was even trying to get into film screenwriting, but it didn't work at the time. It would work later. 1950s, he begins a U.S. tour. A U.S. tour would have been going to campuses and private dinners and book clubs, bookstores, doing readings, recitations, writing, teaching. Now this woman, Margaret Taylor, is an asterisk there. She was his biggest proprietor, contributor. She paid his way. At the time, there was no National Endowment for the Arts or anything even like it. So they would have had to find what they called a benefactor in order to pay their way so that they could survive until they got paid. Well, she decides that she's going to tell Caitlin about a woman named Pearl. Pearl would be Dylan's American mistress. They split up and reconcile in the same year while Dylan is over in Persia writing a script. They write letters back and forth, breaking up and reconciling. He does compose that year, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. His father is dying. And so he wants to write him a poem because he's extremely upset by it. He does 2nd, 3rd, and 4th American tours, working very hard. His father dies, his sister dies, and then finally, he drinks himself into a hole, and he collapses at the Chelsea Hotel in New York City. If anybody is a Sid and Nancy fan, you'll know what happened there. Look it up. But and then finally he dies on November 9th in 1953. Some of the more famous works, of course, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, and Death Shall Have No Dominion. Under Milkwood, a play for voices, that was originally a poem that he had written. While with the radio, he turned it into a radio play, and eventually it was actually a theater play. People would go to the theater just to listen to voices, not even hear anybody, first in his time. And then next year, the Dylan Thomas Centenary, 2014, look out for that. There'll be all kinds of festivals around. So let's talk about his major works here, a couple of his major works. The one I like the most is on page 31. 31, there we go. This is called Being But Men. Having come from the trees, or trying to get back into the trees, this reminds us not to lose the wonder of the simplicity of our humanity, and compares us to what children might do. But since we're grown up, but use the term "but" as if we're lesser than, being but men, not the one, not children. We miss the wonder. Okay, if that made sense. Being but men, we walked into the trees afraid, letting our syllables be soft for fear of waking the rooks, for fear of coming noiselessly into a world of wings and cries. If we were children, we might climb, catch the rook sleeping, and break no twig, and, after the soft ascent, thrust out our heads above the branches to wonder at the unfailing stars. Out of confusion, as the way is, and the wonder that man knows, out of the chaos would come bliss. That, then, is loveliness. We said, children in wonder watching the stars is the aim and the end. Being but men, we walked into the trees. As if childhood were greater than our adulthood, right? But being but men, we didn't make it to the top of the trees. We were trying to be too quiet rather than do what may have come naturally. All right. And, of course, we'll do Do Not Go Gently Into That Good Night, his most famous. This is written to his father on his father's deathbed. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at the close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learn too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Definitely a kind of a sad tome for his dad. All right, short bio on Dylan Thomas. Look forward to doing some activities, and please leave comments, add facts, and I believe I'm under. Well, actually, here it'll say here for you. I believe I'm still under 10 minutes. All right, thank you.